You are Liza, aren't you? Yes. My name is Emily. I've been looking for you.
Greetings, fellow insomniacs, and welcome to another episode of the Creature Features Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. I am your host, I am your friend and fright, good old Chunky Larry, and we are well into this discussion, looking at some of the films deemed unwatchable by the British people, specifically One Merry White House. And in this episode, I've got such a fucking obscure and brilliant film that doesn't explain itself. And it's a mystery wrapped up in a quandary, wrapped up in an illusion. And there's so much that we can get into with something that provides so little in the terms of plot. And I can't think of a better person to have a conversation with about the film that we are going to be discussing, which is 1981's The Beyond, written and directed by Lucio Fulci and also co-written by Dardano Sarcetti. So this is going to be the second part of the Gates of Hell trilogy, but it is the first time that the Gates of Hell trilogy has been discussed in this brand new iteration of Creature Features. But ladies and germs, boys and girls, children of all spectrums, I have with me today a man who needs no interruption or introduction. To be quite frankly, he might get interrupted quite a bit through the course of this conversation, but I'm sure he'll return the favor. This is one of the smartest men on all of TikTok, a deep thinker and a deep speaker who says things he means and means the things that he says. Ladies and gentlemen, the great and powerful Oz. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me, Larry. It's a hell of an introduction. Have you ever worked as a barker?
If anybody wants to see the amazing fat man, I'm here all week.
Yeah, I mean, you could be outside a strip club and you would absolutely get people through that door.
Yeah. Pussy, come on in, pussy lovers.
Well, maybe if you weren't doing a mediocre Cheech Marin, but
so this is one of those movies that absolutely, when you think of the term video nasty, this is what you would see when they reference the video nasties. And I'm surprised, honestly, because one of the things that I'm doing this time around with the Creature Features podcast is I'm allowing my guests to pick the films that they discuss. And I assumed, getting Oz the Great and Powerful on the show, giving him carte blanche to pick whatever he wanted, that we were going to be talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is also a video nasty.
Yeah.
What made you decide this one?
The Beyond is a movie that I saw for the first time. Well, that I saw the first 20 minutes of for the first time when I was too young. I had no experience with 70s horror, really, especially with Italian 70s horror.
Totally different beast.
I know this was 1981, but stylistically, it still has one foot very firmly set in that sort of 70s Catholic expressionism horror that was coming out of Italy and Spain mostly. Weird that. And
Yeah, no shit.
and I had like mono or a terrible flu, some kind of viral thing that had, like, I'm in high school, I'm like 15, 16 years old, 15, I think. And I was out for like 3 weeks.
Mm.
And like, when you're a teenager,
That's a
3 weeks
lifetime.
is a long fucking time. And my mom and my sister, I don't remember where they were. They were out of town though. And so my dad would go to work and he'd call me like halfway through the day. How you feeling? Sport? You doing all right? You know, that kind of thing. And are you hungry yet? No, not really. But like I had to recover because with mono and whatever, there's a incubation state. I don't know, whatever. It was the 80s or I guess the early 90s. No, 80s. Anyway, my dad would stop at Blockbuster on the way home every night and pick up like a stack of, I think the maximum you could rent was like
5.
four,
It's 5.
five.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
5.
he would pick up 5 movies and bring them home.
Mm.
And we'd usually watch one together. And then the next day while he was at work and I was convalescing, I'd just tear through the other 4.
Yeah,
Because what else could I do? I was an invalid,
for real.
you know. And he said, "Well, so what kind of movies do you want, Slick?" And I said, I want some more horror movies." Because I'd already seen The Evil Dead 1 and 2 at this point. I'd seen, April Fool's Day. I'd seen Hellraiser. So I sort of had a sense of the directions that the genre could go in at that time. And this was very much as a neophyte. I was really just coming to love the genre beyond the trappings, beyond like the gothic cobweb, smoke machine sort of universal classics. And I figured I'd seen Hellraiser. Like I can handle pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And one of the movies was The Beyond. And I popped it in and I remember thinking like, oh, weird. Like their sync is a little bit off, I wonder if this is one of those like Italian movies or something like that. And I think I made it to the scene where Joe the plumber goes down into the basement. And that was my first experience with Uncle Lucio's eye trauma fetish.
Mm.
And I was like, you know what? I think I'm done with this movie. And I turned it off and I went and passed out, and I saw it for the first time all the way through, I don't know, probably 20 years ago. And I've revisited every so often ever since. It's not a movie that I would ever call like a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's borderline incoherent. The performances are weird. It is a strangely paced movie that seems to almost just be indeterminably long scenes that don't seem to mean anything, but they're setting up the next extravagantly weird death set piece.
Absolutely. And fun story to that is these were kind of a culling of some of Lucio Fulci's unused death set pieces. And
no kidding.
Yes. No. So
I love that.
He took a lot of things that he had kind of in mind for other shit. And, because at this point, this is the second film in the Gates of Hell trilogy. It's an unofficial trilogy of films that all star Catherine McCall and all, touch on this doorway to the underworld, basically. And before we get into that, I think we should, because we're off to the races. Let's do the IMDb synopsis.
Yes.
For 1981.
Yes, we should do that first.
Beyond.
You have a formula, god damn it.
I feel like we're not going to see rails today. All right.
I like to think I bring out the best in you.
You certainly do. The cellar of an old hotel is built on top of the door to the beyond. Bloody zombies roam there. A young woman who is the heir to the hotel wants to restore it. She is confronted with the strange events. A painter has a lethal fall, the plumber vanishes, and her friend breaks his neck. When she escapes the hospital of a friendly doctor, she doesn't know that the nightmare is waiting for her.
Wow.
That was by Matthias Luer.
Well, Matthias, that's an interesting take. Having worked professionally in the synopsis business during my sojourn in the film industry. Oh, hello, Ray. Ray, don't push the camera. This is my cat. This is sweet
life,
baby
folks.
Ray. He is indeed the sweetest cat of all time, but he gets a little cranky when he's not the center of my attention.
So you said something really interesting right there, Mr. Oswald. And that is that you did this professionally. And you've
synopses, yes,
written a synopsis or two. Because we have a little game here on the show where we lay out these synopses that IMDb provides, and they're usually terrible. And so then
Matthias.
It then is up to my guest to cleanse the palate with a little game that I call Synopsis Obscura. And the way that it works is we're going to do the antithesis of what Matthias did here today. And we're going to sell the film without giving anything away. And make it sexy. Go.
Without giving anything away. In a world where death has no meaning. In a world where some doors should remain locked. In a world where Joe the Plumber is the name of one of your central characters, you have Lucio Fulci's Paean to Eye Trauma, The Beyond. Arachnophobes avoid.
We got the movie phone voice and everything. It was bravo. Bravo.
It really is. I had forgotten how much Lucio Fulci hates eyeballs.
Yeah. He's got a serious aversion to them.
Holy shit. Every single death in this movie, which has a lot of death, there's eyeball trauma.
Just about.
I mean, I showed Annika Zombie 2, last year, and because she had to see Shark versus Zombie. Of
course, it's a rite of passage.
And she was like, this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. Or at least the part with the shark and the zombie was.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten how genuinely the scene is with the door and the splinter and the eyeball. That's a phenomenally upsetting in how it was shot and edited and performed a sequence. In The Beyond, it sort of feels like the summer stock version of that. Or the community theater version of that, where each eye-damaging sequence is so prolonged and so visceral that it almost leaves behind any sort of reality, and it goes into this sort of bombastic, operatic level.
It kind of feels like he saw the reaction that it got in Zombie 2. It was like, time to double the fuck down. So
it's just
literally, dude, in the span of 1980 and 1981, Lucio Fulci made 5 movies.
Jesus God.
He made all 3 of the Gates of Hell films.
Right.
The Black Cat and the New York Ripper.
Oh my God.
In fucking 2 years, he made those 5 movies. Wild.
He had a good run right there. That's probably some of his best work.
Legitimately.
Or at least his most iconic.
Prolific, yeah.
Yeah. And he was what, in his 50s by then?
Oh yeah, he had already been working. He'd done giallos, he'd
For
done
20 years.
comedies, he'd done crime
Yeah.
films,
Westerns.
westerns. Like he ran the gambit, and it was
Yeah.
zombie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like all of
hit.
the Italian directors of that era.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he
Like all of
much
those
like all
guys
of those
did every
directors just
genre.
followed the trend. Yeah, Argento made fucking
Yeah.
westerns. So
Yeah.
like Argento wrote Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say he worked on Once Upon a Time in the West. I mean,
Yeah.
like literally one of the greatest, arguably, westerns ever made. So,
Absolutely.
like, yeah, no, it's wild. But you can tell that Dario brought in a lot of the weird relationship between Henry Fonda and Claudia Cardinale. He was like, I think it would be really cool if it was really creepy. Sorry, that was French. I can't do Dario. You know, it's if I close my eyes and I say, I'm a genius.
My Dario sounds a little like this. It's me, Dario.
Hey, I'm a Dario Argento. I feel like this is maybe a little offensive.
Red.
I think I've managed to offend myself. Man, yeah, no, the Beyond is, it's a vibe. Like, I don't think it's a good movie. And I definitely don't think it, like, and it's so all over the place. You know? Like,
so
it's...
I've got a way, because, I've done some reading on the Beyond in preparation for the conversation, and I've seen a lot of like people talking about it as a cosmic horror film. And so
right.
I watched it in that lens on my most recent watch of it, and it makes a lot more sense. That
it does. Yes.
There's kind of a fabric of reality that you're crossing over, and so the unreal becomes the real, and there being these kind of elder ancient spirits that are larger than the world that you inhabit. It makes you and yourself feel small, and it's isolated, and each one of those films is isolated to these small towns. In fucking Gates of Hell, the town's name is Dunwich, and in this one, it's it's the Book of Avon, and that's a book that's referenced in Lovecraft, and so
not Lovecraft. The other guy was Clark Ashton Smith. Had Avon, but Ashton Smith is one of the guys that, like, along with like L. Sprague de Camp, like really sort of brought the Lovecraft mythos into the mainstream.
And so I think when you look at it through the lens of kind of transversing through a portal, because that's what each one of these is about. It's about a different gate of hell. And when this film was released in America, it was released as The Seven Doors of Death. And before I'd ever seen The Beyond, I'd seen The Seven Doors of Death. And so that was my initial viewing. It was a Seven Doors of Death copy, and so it was really just fucking like a grimy looking copy. And then in the late 90s, you get Anchor Bay and a couple of other distributors that started re-releasing these films and cleaning them up and like doing like proper film transfers for VHS. And that's when I saw The Beyond. It was like late 90s, early 2000s when I actually saw The Beyond.
So night and day, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But even at its, which is funny because we're talking about censorship, and we're talking about, the BBFC fucking prohibiting things from being seen, but also butchering films. And we felt the brunt of that because that film was severely edited before it fucking made its way to American shores. And so, we didn't get a full version of that film until the late 90s. And that's really fucking wild if we're, so staunchly for freedom of speech and all of this shit and expressionism and all of that. And Lucio Fulci himself, you can look at his work. He is in love with the American ideals and just America in general. Like he films every aspect of America with this fetishistic, voyeuristic approach, and the way he shoots New York, Louisiana, Massachusetts, like across the board, he loves America. And for America, the land of freedom, to say, no, we're not giving you all of this. We're giving you what we decide is good enough. And cutting massive parts of that off. And it can be argued that it's just violence and that there's no fucking plot. And I understand that to a certain extent, but I think that what you're doing is you're cutting out a director's voice. You're robbing them of their ability to tell a story and not giving your people the ability to make the decision like you made for yourself when you said, no, this ain't for me, and you turned it off 20 minutes in. That's you deciding, you making the decision, not somebody else deciding for you. And ultimately, that's why I feel that this movie, more than just about any of the movies on this list, is important, because there's no structure in terms of, a linear storytelling template. You get beats and you get sequences and you get scenes, but it all feels like it's this kind of lucid nightmare logic. And so the same thing could be said about Suspiria, but because it's in a ballet house, it gets a fucking pass. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. There's a scene where somebody's beating heart is stabbed in Suspiria.
Well, let's not forget that in Suspiria, a film set, as you pointed out, in a dance academy, there is a room full of razor wire.
Exactly.
There's just a storage room, I guess, of razor wire. And honestly, I think it is important to bring up Argento and to bring up Suspiria, but also to bring up the Three Mothers trilogy as it is. And hold it up next to the Gates of Hell trilogy, because the reality is there's a lot of similarity in tone between the two trilogies, or at least, the two movies that Dario made. It's a shame he never got to make a third one.
Yeah. I'm so glad that we never had to see. I guess I'm sad that we never got to see how that all
sad
turned out. I'm sure that it would have been great. And not at all terrible with Udo Kier.
Oof. Yeah. And goth girls on a train are the scariest thing that he could come up with in that one. Now, that's not entirely fair. I mean, look, full disclosure, I was pretty friendly with the screenwriters on that back in the day. And Adam Girash and Jay Sanderson, who are really cool people, really sweet people, very funny, very kind, and very genuine in the way that a lot of people in the horror industry are. you know, and that just very, and Adam especially is a huge genre fan, and he didn't like to talk about making Mother of Tears very much. You know, he was clearly pretty disappointed. I'm projecting my, you know, my take on it, but because we didn't share our deepest feels, but
yeah.
Can you imagine though, like getting to work with one of like the filmmakers, like one of your idols,
and then that's what you make,
and you know,
yeah,
and that's what you make.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, he was very proud of the monkey with the razor idea. Like he was really thrilled that that got used, but like, you know,
but that's phenomena.
It's a weird thing because, you know, it's like, oh, right. Sorry. They all blur together for me. When you were talking about the way that the forcing of the video nasty ban, and how that affected the authorial voice, it's that weird balance that is always so difficult with film. Where does it stop being commerce and where is it art? You know, and like I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers. Nobody has the fucking answers. That is like a sort of philosophical-ish question that media literacy has wrestled with forever.
Yeah.
You know, but the reality is that it is a hybrid. It is both commercial and art. And so I think that when we see edits like that, when we see a movie go from, if still incoherent, at least the director's vision of chaotic incoherence.
Yeah, and that incoherence
it's incoherent because of editing.
Yeah,
because of cutting.
His version
scenes.
of incoherence has a reason.
Exactly.
That version of incoherence is just to avert people's eyes from things that they think that they shouldn't be seeing, which in and of itself,
well, you know,
is created art. Like those aren't actually people dying. Those are creations, artistic creations, special makeup effects, and
it is a depiction. Yeah.
So,
and let's be honest, this isn't one of those moral panics where you can say, well, at least I understand why they wanted to cut that scene of kids being shot in a school in 1999. We'd all go, okay, yeah, I get it. I understand. I don't necessarily
Scream 3 is
agree,
a perfect example of that.
Right. But like, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it.
But again,
whereas with
Scream
something
3,
like
that was done at the discretion of the filmmakers, realizing it would be in poor taste to do it. They said,
hey, let's not.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's the difference.
And I always think, you know, when people who, I think it's easier to target movies like The Beyond, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though I don't know how you would edit the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to be screened in the UK, which is probably why it wasn't for like 25 years or something, since there's so little on-screen like gore. Yeah, well, I think that the entire movie is violent.
It's implied violence.
The entire movie is emotional violence, and implied, but also emotional violence, which is why I think it is the greatest horror film ever made. But back to The Beyond, Lucio Fulci. Back to New Orleans. A place below the water table, and so there's no basements. Yet in this hotel, where there are basements, the practical effects, and it's like, wow, this is cool. And you kind of space out in between. If this was on at a party, you know, like you'd sort of perk up during the set pieces and then go back to conversation, eating pretzels, you know, in between.
Yeah.
But when you do watch it, and when you get to see Fulci's vision, when you get to see his, you know, the sequence where Catriona MacColl watches herself run through the door 5 or 6 times, when Emily, who plays her own theme song, Emily plays her own theme song on the piano. I love that.
It's pretty fucking dope.
When it was over, Annika turned to me and she said, "So this is like David Lynch."
Thank you.
And I was like, well, you're not wrong. Like, it's easy to make fun of it though, or to just consider it to be, oh, well, it's not art. It's grotesque because of that squicky Italian practical effect. The way that when the tarantulas bite into the cheek, and then of course
I love that scene.
the eye. We get those shots of like the gristle stretching out, and you're going, meat doesn't do that. Skin doesn't do quite like that. But you know what? But no, this is bad. No one should see this. Why? I mean, look, I understand that there's an argument to be made about not everything is for everybody. And, caveat emptor, buyer beware. Movies are a lie agreed upon. None of that blood's real unless they're using pig's blood. We know this. There's a safety valve with movies. I'm sorry, Ray. Ray was excited because I said pig's blood. There's a safety valve. I mean, for me, that is why I love horror, because it gives me this cathartic rush that I desire and I seek out, but it's completely safe. There is zero like, oh man, this movie might be too much for me.
So I want to kind of cut you off and kind of pose a question. This is a little random, but you had brought up Joe the plumber, and
Joe the plumber.
I I was wondering, because there's this weird kind of lingering with Martha and Joe, like an unspoken thing, and Arthur is also very interested about Joe, and they
is Joe coming?
They have this weird thing where they're hiding something, and it's not anything like particularly nefarious, but is there any possibility that Arthur is the love child of Martha and Joe?
That's a really interesting question. And obviously a argument could be made for a sort of Southern Gothic, out of wedlock energy there. And definitely the way that Veronica Lazar as Martha, Veronica Lazar, who of course also played the second mother in Inferno, back to Dario Argento, and I love that shot of her in Inferno when she's leaning across the table with the book with her hair in her face. I find her incredibly sexy. Even playing Martha with her like weird sunken eyes and her, I'm like, yeah, man, Veronica Lazar, she was a hot one. But the way she says, like, I cleared a path for Joe, and it's like, what? Okay, why is that so important to you? And then she calls for him, and there's a real like pathos in her voice when she's trying to find him after we know he's been killed, but she doesn't, except for, doesn't she? Because are Martha and Arthur even real, or are they in the same weird sort of limbo that Emily is? I always got the impression that they, like Emily, were from the beyond, or were somehow infected by the beyond. And so I never even really considered Joe as being possibly connected to them.
I think that when you cross over, your eyes go away.
Right.
And so, when Emily is surrounded by Schweitz and all of those dead, she says, I don't want to go back. You can't make me. And
she says it a lot.
That she's, seen the other side. And that, and so time is all over the place in the movie. It starts in 1927, jumps in time, 50 fucking years, almost 60.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's then, the place where Emily lives has been abandoned for 5 years. So is she
Right.
from
And
5 years ago?
is she a ghost? Is she? And because Dr. David Warbeck is all like, there's no blind girl named Emily. I know everybody around here. I don't know Martha and Arthur. I know everybody around here.
Yeah.
Like, and that comes up both to describe Martha and Arthur, whew, and to describe Emily. David Warbeck's never heard of them before. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I want to assume that is intentional because of the way that the Seven Doors of Death was released here, and because of the assumption of incompetence that I think a lot of American filmgoers have for Italian horror in particular. They sort of expect, oh, well, they were just making all these things for $5 in a gravel pit behind, the studio in Rome, and like,
they'd be right.
At least when there's a dismissiveness to a lot of foreign film, unless it's the French, of course, that's sort of hard baked into a lot of American cineists of certainly of my generation and older. But the reality is, like it or not, that's a moot point. Like, Fulci's doing something, and he's doing it intentionally. The dreamlike way that we first meet Emily on the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, like, that's
beautiful fucking scene.
This isn't like an accidental, like, beautiful scene. Like, no, this was, Lucci had been making movies for 30 fucking years. Like, he knew what he was doing, or 20 years, but he knew what he was doing. And so it's unfair to the filmmaker to be like, well, that's weird. The script's really bad that it mentions this thing twice with David Warbeck not knowing people. And it's like, no, it doesn't. That serves a purpose. It helps imbalance the viewer, because this strong-jawed man, that we're watching, who clearly we're supposed to pay attention to, he doesn't know these people. What's that mean? Why does Joe's body pop up in the bathtub when he died in the basement? Like,
that's
it
a fucking
matter.
Fantastic scene, by the way. She pulls that hair out of the tub, and the water slowly fucking comes down, and it slowly reveals him.
Also, clearly no longer the actor who played Joe earlier in the movie, and it's someone wearing a Joe mask with a completely different frame because the shoulders are all wrong, and it's a different shirt.
But it's also reminiscent of Schweitz's introduction when he kills Joe. It's fucking, like, it's so good, dude. And it works in the sense that visually and in the moment, you can completely divorce yourself from everything that happened 45 minutes ago. And you can also not. You can be completely strapped in and go on the journey, or you can be completely disengaged, and each moment works. Each moment, maybe as like a large, macro as opposed to micro, doesn't work, but in that micro, it fucking works, and you're living moment to moment with it, and you're going on a journey, and not knowing is kind of the joy of the journey. A lot of the times, and you've seen my fucking tirades on TikTok where I talk about not wanting to know shit about the movie before I go into it. This is one of those experiences where, as I'm watching the movie, I don't know shit. like you don't know shit when the movie's over.
Well, and in the big scene, or what would be the big exposition scene if this was made by probably anybody else, when Katarina McCall tells creepy Emily, tell me everything, and Emily's like, okay, then we cut to something else, and we hang out with David Warbeck for a while, and then we come back, And Katrina McCall's like, I just can't believe you wouldn't tell me that there was a portal to hell underneath my hotel. And it's like, wait, holy shit. She just told you everything and we didn't get to see it.
Exactly. But that like that can't not be done by design.
Yeah. You're right.
It feels like it's like, okay, now I'm going to tell you what's going on. Psych. And it just like,
hey, audience, you don't get to know.
You don't get to know.
The
because so often, specifically when you're watching a movie, you as the audience know things before the character does. And that creates the suspense of what they're going through. But it being the inverse of that, you're the one in the suspense because you're still trying to figure out what's going on. And like, that's fucking crazy to me, but it works.
Yeah. No, it is.
So there's also the idea, and you know, the movie begins and it ends with this painting. So could it be that it's a loop, and that the loop is all just the machinations of this artist before he was killed, and he wasn't able to complete the loop, so it just repeats and repeats and repeats.
Repeats. Yeah, you could definitely
David Warbeck and Catherine McCall constantly meeting each other. Joe constantly getting his fucking eyeball plucked out. Like it all just repeats, and it sets itself back into place because it's the dying thoughts of an artist.
Whoa, man. I mean, like, that's like definitely possible. But also, I could really go for a brownie right now.
I want to, while I'm talking about the artist, just bring up one more thing that I think is fucking really cool. But the scene where he's fucking beaten to death with the chain, that's not the only time that Lucio Fulci's ever done that. He does it much more effectively in another film that I absolutely fucking adore called Don't Torture a Duckling.
Right.
And that scene is fucking incredible. So this woman who's considered the town witch, just like Schweitz is considered a warlock, you ungodly warlock. You know, there's a series of murders that are going on, and they all believe that it's this witch, and they end up fucking catching up with her and beating her fucking to death with chains. And it's so fucking like gnarly and effective, and it's in color as opposed to this one, which is in sepia tone. And originally, this one was in color, but to try to help kind of differentiate, you know, that this is in the past and now we're in the present, they added the sepia tone. But I just, like, for my money, I want to see the version of her or him being beaten to death in color and getting the fucking lie thrown on his face. It's lie, right?
Yeah, it has to be,
because it doesn't look like acid.
Yeah, because they throw the powder on him first and then they throw water on him. I mean, so it's a two-part process. Lie.
Yeah.
What about the morgue where there's just the random jar of acid sitting on a table
and pours on her face? It's so good, dude.
And we never find out why she fell. She looks off screen and she screams.
Yeah.
And then she's on the floor and somehow the acid jar is just shaking loose. And then this poor fucking kid, Anne of Green Gables, comes in to see mommy. And we've got the scene where I love that they actually took like a head and mocked it up and then poured hydrochloric acid on it.
Yeah. It's
Like,
fucking beautiful.
okay.
It's fucking
I mean,
beautiful.
that's not the word I'd use, but it is impressive.
Oh no, that's a thing of beauty, man.
Yeah.
Like so this is one of those movies. So for me, when I was like coming up and I was watching horror movies and like becoming who I fucking am, I ended up spending a lot of time in Santa Cruz, right? And
Mhm.
I had this buddy, his name was Eric, and he was like this fucking really cool, rad artist. He actually uh, drew this Leatherface that's on my arm. And
Nice, dude.
so he and me, we both kind of like were like, oh, what about this? Have you seen this? And that was the game, right? And
Right. That was your
so
relationship. Yeah.
yeah. And so I would find fucked up weird movies, and then he'd go, oh no, what about this? Right. And he would go like he was like a tape trader. And so he got the shit.
Oh, cool.
He got the shits. And
The
so
doo-doo.
and so he would like do these cuts of shit, and um I'd see scenes like the scene from fucking like Tenebrae, right? Where they do that crane
Right.
shot around the house, boom, 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 boom. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just like fucking mind blown. It's like it was there that I saw the scene of Pippi Longstockings getting her fucking shit blown off. And I was just like, what is this?
Yeah. That effect is really just like, holy shit.
It's fucking incredible, dude. Like,
It's wild. Yeah.
and
And I guess
so
they shot all of the exterior stuff in New Orleans, and they shot some of the house stuff in New Orleans, but then all of the big set pieces
we're in Rome.
they shot back in Rome, and I love that. It's sort of like, well, yeah, they went to where where they had all their guys,
Yeah.
where they had all their stuff.
Not even that. Like, the reason that you shoot in Louisiana is for the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
this is an atmospheric film that just happens to also be a wild left field fucking Italian film.
Arguably all atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which I don't mean that as a pejorative. Like, I will watch a movie for its atmosphere, like, repeatedly. And I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've watched The Beyond. I've put it on at work almost every day this week, at least once a day,
It's fucking
just to kind of have going. It's a gorgeous film. It's beautifully shot. Some of it is so incomprehensibly weird, like when Emily's running away and Catherine McCall watches herself run away, and I'm kind of going, how much was edible? What did but David Warbeck's stubble shifting slightly in between some shots, that's not anybody's fault but David Warbeck.
Yeah.
But it's all atmosphere, and I'm here for that. I mean, my favorite David Lynch film was always Wild at Heart, because the atmosphere of it was so very Southern.
Yes.
In a very eerie way. And this has some of that. And I mean, I honestly would have loved if there'd been more external shit, more outdoor sequences, because I kind of crave that. But it's a neat movie. It's a really nifty movie.
So
let's
get into putting this into a bottle, putting a little bow on that bottle,
right,
and sending it into the ocean. And the way that we do that is with Reapers. And so the way that the Reaper score works is 0 is the absolute high or lowest. That is like Driller Killer. 5 the absolute penultimate horror film that's like Psycho, somewhere in that ballpark. Right. So it's a spectrum, and you could do 0.5s or whatever, but how many Reapers are you coming in with for Lucio Fulci's The Beyond?
So if 1 is Terrifier and 5 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, fucking canon guy. I love that kid, but dear God, I'm gonna give Lucio Fulci's The Beyond right now. Sitting here talking about this with you, a friend in fright. This is a 3. This is a solid 3 for me.
That is not a bad score for this.
When I watched it a few weeks ago, the night before we were going to record originally, and Anik and I watched it together, I just went back and like glanced at my Letterboxd, and I was not kind. You know, I only gave it like 2 stars or like a star and a half, and it's like, you know, clearly I was just not feeling it that night. But it's one of those movies where, like, Tombs of the Blind Dead is a movie that I love. It is a ugly movie at times. It is a gorgeous movie. It is deeply Spanish sexist 1970s, like hairy chest men, like problematic movie. But I fucking love that movie because it's such a great vibe.
Yeah.
But I have to be in the right mood to watch that. And I think The Beyond is the same kind of thing where if I'm looking for more than just iconography and vibes, The Beyond's not gonna scratch my itch.
Yeah.
But if I just want like some weird fucking occult energy, some of that eldritch, you know, sort of energy, that cosmic horror, what the fuck energy that, you know, y'all were never gonna make it. And now you're in the painting. Sucks to be you, you know, like, though I kind of wish he'd been able to shoot his original ending. Don't you?
Yeah, I don't know. I prefer the ending that we got. Yeah. Like, because the other option was them doing it at a carnival, and it's like,
right.
I feel like Romero did that just fine. You know what I mean?
I mean, kind of hard to beat that, but I don't know. It's funny because when I watched it this afternoon, when they ran into the dark space, into the beyond, and I thought, what if you had like the carnival sounds, like the sound of a carnival as they ran into that dark space, and you know how like the spider ride or the tilt-a-whip or whatever the fuck, you could just see one of those cars, like, I don't know, it felt, definitely had nothing to do with the weed, it felt appropriate. And I was like, yeah, man, because like New Orleans, I mean, he's like sitting there in this like foundation of excellence in this town where literally, you know, Creole culture, black soul culture ran straight into blue collar Italian immigrant culture, created some of the best fucking food in the South, you know? And like,
so the French.
What a better place. Yeah, fuck the French. What better place for an Italian filmmaker to come make an American horror movie than New Orleans, you know? Like, I mean, we all talk about like, New York Italians. I mean, but that's a stereotype. But like, you ever wonder why Emeril Lagasse sounds like he's from Brooklyn when he's from the fucking Canal District in New Orleans? It's because that's what Italian immigrants sounded like down there too.
So I just, if I were to put this in a different location for the ending, it would have been the fucking Louisiana Cemetery.
Yeah.
I mean, it's right fucking there for the taking.
Yeah.
And we know he's not opposed to just guerrilla fucking filming shit. I mean, look at the end of fucking Zombie.
I was going to say End of Zombie is one of the greatest finales like ever fucking shot.
So if you've got Louisiana, and that's one of the things that it's primarily known for, if I were ending the Beyond, that's where I would end it. That's just me. But, you know, we're going to start getting out of here.
Time,
oh, shit. I didn't fucking Reaper it.
Oh, we did. Yeah, Reaper. What's your Reaper, bro?
So I'm going to come in a little bit higher than you. I'm going to come in with 3.5 Reapers out of 5.
Yeah.
I think that this is one of those films that is a journey into interpretation. And I think that a lot of the time, people are opposed to films that are open to interpretation. And every time you watch it, you can have a different interpretation of it. And it's based on your mood at the time. And that is what great art is. It's supposed to be a reflection of you, not you a reflection of it. And, and so you're supposed to be able to internalize the art for what you internalize it as, not, some broad blanket statement, because then that's when it stops being art. When they have to hammer you over the head with what it's about, it loses the effectiveness of you being able to consume it. That's one of the reasons why books are so fucking superior to film, is because it's a lot of mind's eye, and you visualizing these things as you're consuming them mentally, and so when a film can do that, that's something special. Is this a movie that I can watch all the time? Absolutely not. But when I put it on, it's a fucking treat. There's spiders eating people. There are fucking eyeballs popping out. There's a fucking nail that pops an eyeball out. Like there are blind people. The dog fucking eats a lady. There's just so fucking much in this movie from beginning to end. And I would rate it higher, but then it would fuck my rating system up. So this is a 3.5. And I feel like 4s you got to earn, 5s you got to earn. New York Ripper for me would be like a 4.5.
Yeah, I get that.
Fucking Don't Torture a Duckling would probably be a 5 for me. But we're gonna get out of here, so please, Oz, tell people where they can follow you.
I don't know why they would, but I am Oslowe, Return of the Oz, OS, on the TikTok. I'm Oslowe on Letterboxd. I think I'm like Oslowe everywhere. I'm Oslowe. It's who I am. Find me on your own terms, or don't. I'm not the boss of you.
You can find us in a couple of different ways. You can start by liking us on Facebook, facebook.com/CreaturePod, by following us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at CreaturePod, or just search Creature Features Podcast. It's however you feel like doing it. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but if you could subscribe in every single one of those fucking platforms, because it helps me out. It makes me look like I'm a fucking big deal. And if I look like a big deal, more people are willing to come on, like Oz here. But we are going to continue this Video Nasties theme. We're actually going to be wrapping it up next week with Eaten Alive. You might be saying to yourself, but Chunky, you've already covered Eaten Alive. Fun story, there's more than one Eaten Alive in the Video Nasties list, and we got both of them this month. So we will be looking at the Toby Hooper classic Eaten Alive, Young Robert Englund, fucking Crocodiles, Southern Charm. It's all fucking there. You should go out of your way to watch it before next week, because we're going to be spoiling the ever-loving dick out of it. But until then, for Oslowe and for myself, again, my name is Chunky. This has been another episode of the Creature Features Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Listen with someone you trust.